First, just let me say thank you to all of you who have taken time out of your busy days to come and spend a little time on, as we attempt to wrestle with these questions, to my dear friend, Dr. Glenn, who is the co-founding editor of the Journal for Hip Hop and Religion, the most significant academic intervention in hip hop concerning the role of religion is deeply important. And so I want to say thank you to him. And then Brother Jake, I know his name has, well, there he is, Brother Jake, who runs Theology of Ferguson, which has been the most significant, contribution of evangelical theology around the questions of race, faith, and religion. And so he is the reason that I am here. And so thank you, Brother Jake. And if you all could... And of course to my comrades that I'll be sharing the podium with, and I wanted to say thank you to both of you as well, and then to you, Sister President. There are 10 female presidents of Christian colleges in America, and she is one of them. Her sheer presence as at the head of this ship speaks significantly to the ways in which women have begun to reject that admonition, women be silent in the church. There's some young women in this room who are inside of congregations that have ignored their humanity and have relegated their capacities to that of primarily the domestic sphere. And so you are a model to those women. And so we say thank you for taking the risk of being a trailblazer. If I might just take a few moments, and we're going to wrestle with a few questions and engage in some democratic dialogue. There's so many of my friends who are I know there's some Unitarians in here. Where are Unitarians at? So the General Assembly of the Unitarian Church just passed a resolution on Black Lives Matters that included prison abolition. Following the leadership of their young people, and then went into the street and shut the street down. That's a level of radical Christian and religious communion. Perhaps the Unitarian Church is the most radical communion of religious creatures in the country. And for them, we say thank you. To our dear friend, Sister Teresa, and the work of the Don't Shoot folk of Portland, we say thank you. Where the Black Lives Matters folks? They around here. I saw them earlier today. I know there are a few of the Black Lives Matters folks, Portland. So I wanted to say thank you to all of them. I want to wrestle with 3 questions as we consider the theme, religion in the time of terror. And so those 3 questions I want to wrestle with is: who is Jesus? What is the church? And what does it mean to be human? Who is Jesus? What is the church? And what does it mean to be human? And so we begin with this curious understanding of who Jesus is. One of the orthodoxies of Christianity that was never debated. There was always debate in Christianity on whether or not Jesus was human, but there was always never consideration on whether or not Jesus was divine. And so one of the orthodoxies of Christianity is that God became flesh. And so God makes a choice to become flesh in the body of an unwed teenage mother among an unimportant people in an unimportant part of the world living under occupation. This is the choice of God. If we believe this orthodoxy of Christianity, that God chooses to become flesh in the body of an unwed teenage mother among an unimportant people in an unimportant part of the world living under occupation, this is God's choice. Why does God make this choice according to the Christian mythos? What does that say to us about this moment? Because if you tell me what you think about Jesus, I can tell you what you think about Ferguson. And so if you begin with an understanding that of the orthodoxy of Christianity, which has endured for over 2,000 years, that God was born into the body of an unwed teenage mother among an unimportant people living under occupation, and that one of the rumors that was put out as it relates to trying to diminish Jesus' ministry is that he was the product of rape from a Roman centurion. So what does that mean? That God was born into the world in the body of an unwed teenage mother and among an unimportant people in an unimportant part of the world living under occupation, who the rumor was that he was the product of rape. Your Savior, my Savior, the one who we sing, "Oh, come, let us adore him. He alone is worthy." And that part of his occupation is that oftentimes the translation of Jesus as a carpenter is an inappropriate translation. It is inaccurate and is not connected to the historical context, because Jesus was not a carpenter in the traditional sense of the word. He was actually a handyman. The translation is he who works with his hands. So your Savior, my Savior, is a handyman. You know him. He come by your house, say, "Give me $2, $3. I'll sweep them leaves up for you. Do a little electricity. Jack of all trades, master of none. Do the electricity in your house, and all the lights on the left-hand side of the house don't come on no more." Your Savior, my Savior, who is this person of Jesus? Born to an unimportant people among an unimportant part in an unimportant part of the world, to a teenage mother living under occupation, rumored that he is the product of rape from a Roman centurion, and he is a handyman. And so with that orientation of who Jesus is, what is the church? What does it mean to be a religious institution that has crafted itself after this curious Palestinian who was living under occupation? How do you understand yourself as it relates to these body of believers, these people who claim certain forms of religious narrative that are associated with this Palestinian born under occupation? And then finally, what does it mean to be human? And part of what it means to be human is connected to the ways in which we understand the church and the ways in which we understand the church, a way in which we understand this character called Jesus. And so what it means to be human has to do with what we saw in Ferguson. I was born again in the streets of Ferguson. And I saw the very face of God. And God is angry. God is queer. God is a woman who stands in front of tanks and tear gas, and when the most lethal empire in human history says go home, and it says no, I'm not going home. A part of our understanding, if we believe that Jesus was born to unimportant people in an unimportant part of the world, born under occupation, the product of rape, potentially according to the rumors that are around him, then God and the streets of Ferguson begins to look a little different than what we're used to it looking like. And so it's not about us bringing God to the street. God is already there. Because some unimportant people who didn't matter, who live under occupation, police forces in black communities are occupying forces. And that the same, having been in Palestine in 2012, seeing Israeli tactics that were run on Palestinians, the police forces in New York, and in Ferguson and other places of the world were trained in Israel. And so the same tactics that were used in Israel on Palestinians when I was there in 2012 was the same tactics that they used on us in Ferguson. The same company that makes the tear gas that was shot at us in Palestine in 2012 is the same company that makes the tear gas that was shot at us in Ferguson. And so it's an understanding that within the framework of black communities living under occupation by police forces, and it's never been about the demonization of individual police officers. There can be good people involved in immoral systems. And so it is not simply about a few bad apples. We're talking about a rotten system. This is what the biblical narrative is about. That is what the opening line of Mark, that first chapter, that first verse in Mark, it says, this is the gospel of Jesus Christ. Gospel is something that was only under the reserve of the emperor. Only Caesar could write the gospel. And so when Mark opens the line and says that the gospel of Jesus, this is the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, Caesar had said of himself that he was the Son of God. And so what Mark is signifying to us in the biblical narrative is that here is a gospel written by a handyman. And that this handyman is the Son of God. It's about everyday people coming to themselves and understanding the world in such a way. And that part of the Christian narrative is a narrative about is that a person born to an unimportant people in an unimportant part of the world, to a teenage single mother living under occupation, defeated the empire. That's what the cross is. That Christianity in and of itself is not simply about the redemption of the world in a broad abstract sense. It's about some peasant. A peasant articulated a vision of the world, and that the state crucified him and he rose again. And so when you understand that is the kind of understanding of who Jesus is, when you look to Ferguson, you see some young people standing in the street who've been slaughtered and killed day in and day out, every other day in America. Some black mother, some brown mother is laying down a wreath, is putting out candles, putting forth teddy bears for her children who have been murdered. And so every time black people resist against these various forms of oppression, it is a form of resurrection. And to be sure that it doesn't look like what we're used to it looking like, it is angry. That our movement in Ferguson and throughout the country is primarily led by poor black women, the bane of the country. We mock them. We talk about welfare mothers. We talk about how they're not human. We mock them in our public policy, and we hold them up as the bane of existence. But it's poor, black, many of them queer women standing on the front lines, putting their bodies, single mothers, putting their bodies on the line. And just in a parenthetic note, I know I'm in a religious institution that may have certain forms of evangelical sensibilities as it relates to heteronormity and the construction of sexuality. The Supreme Court has ruled you lost. It's over. It's like the Confederacy. You lost. Find somebody else to be mad at. And so the realities that we face in terms of the certain kind of constructions of our understanding of who Jesus is requires us to wrestle differently. And so when we understand that we see the very face of God in some angry kids, Martin Luther King ain't coming back. Get over it. He's not coming back. No, it won't look like the civil rights movement. It's going to look different. It's angry. It's queer. It's profane. And oftentimes elders get really upset when young people say, fuck the police. But if you're more concerned about young people using profanity than the profane conditions that they live in, there's something wrong with you, not them. Now, Sister President, forgive me, I don't curse. I'm just quoting the young people. And then finally, let me just say this on the last note. There are a few of our white friends here. There's this postmodern obsession with this notion of allies. How do I be a good ally? And the great Ruby Sells says we don't need allies. But you see, allies, y'all can check in and out. It's not your, it's not my struggle. I can click a button. I need to wait for black leadership. We need freedom fighters. Because the difference between an ally and a freedom fighter is that you're willing to put your body on the line. You're willing to make you got blood in the game, because if we are Christians and we're committed to this Christian narrative and we believe that racism is a sin, then part of racism being a sin is you got to put blood in the game. Because I read somewhere there is no remission of sin without the shedding of blood. And are you willing to put your body on the line because you understand that you have something spiritually at stake? That your soul is in jeopardy because of racism. that it does something to your humanity, that you are less human because you have not only, you may not be racist, but the fact that you're not engaging in critical struggle. And it doesn't mean you're going to make the right decisions. You're going to screw up. You're going to make mistakes. Black folk going to get mad at you. It's fine. But let me tell you something. The white folks I trust are the ones I've been to jail with. Not workshops, not simply going to church together and having a multiracial worship service where you sing 2 or 3 spirituals together and then all the leadership is white. I'm talking about the kind when there's tear gas, you're standing next to me when they're tear gassing. When they're shooting rubber bullets, you're standing next to us. In our movement in Ferguson, when it get good and hot, we got this call we do. We say John Brown. And that's for all the crazy white folks to come up front. It's about putting your body on the line. It's about making real connections. It's not simply about conversations, although dialogue is essential to the ways in which we form democratic civilizations. But are you willing to put your body on the line? Are you willing to risk all for some people who don't look like you? But you, until white folks in America come to understand that every time they kill a black child, they're killing your child. Until you fundamentally understand that these are your children, that they belong to you, that they are who you are, that they are part and parcel of who you are, until you fundamentally believe that it's not a problem over there because it's something that it diminishes your soul every time they kill a black child, that when you think about your baby laying in the street for 4.5 hours, that when they kill your 12-year-old who's playing with the gun as a child, which children are supposed to do, until that does something to you, we'll never move forward, and the church will never be what it's supposed to be. And so on these questions, who is Jesus? What meaneth the church? We must break open the meaning of the church. And so we're in a church that looks like the street and a communion of protest together. We break that meaning open, and then we see a rejection of that level of oppression that young people are engaging in around the country. They shutting it down. They refuse to have their humanity. There's a relationship that black people have with America, which is that we always know that you're going to oppress us. I don't care how conservative you are or how radical you are. You know that this thing is a little different for you than it is everybody else. And that some of us are going to become really Christian and we think our salvation is going to keep us away from the bullets of the police. Some of us are going to become Afrocentric and we're going to lock our hair and change our names and attempt to return to a space that is different for us. And some of us are going to try to even ignore the problem. But our tenuous agreement as Americans is that you won't disrespect us and you won't leave our baby in the street for 4.5 hours. And don't think we're going to shut it down. And because of this generation of young people who are willing to do this, rebellious, profane, angry, queer, woman-led, it's a good time to be alive. Because in the bodies of everyday, unimportant people, God has broken into history.